Great. Well, hello and welcome everyone to a webinar session as part of the EU Values webinar series. I'm Emily Jones, your host and moderator. This webinar is hosted by the EU Values Network, a collaborative Jean Monnet initiative. If you appreciate today's session, or indeed any of our work, we'd be very grateful if you could follow or subscribe to any of our social media platforms. In particular, if you like hearing from the experts directly, I recommend subscribing to our YouTube channel, as we upload our webinar recordings there, along with 10-minute interviews with experts as well. So, on to today's session. We are honoured to host a distinguished panel of speakers to discuss the recently published book, The Russia-Ukraine War and its Implications on Central Asia. This volume offers a timely and in-depth analysis of how the ongoing conflict in Ukraine is reshaping the political, economic, and social landscape of Central Asia. We're honoured to have three of the book's contributors with us today. First of all, Dr. Assylzat Karabayeva, Assistant Professor at KIMEP University in Kazakhstan. Dr. Karabayeva holds a PhD in International Relations from the International University of Japan and has served as a visiting scholar at George Washington University's Institute for European, Russian, and Euro-Asian Studies. Dr. Rustam Atadjanov, Associate Professor and Associate Dean at KIMEP University School of Law. Dr. Atadjanov earned his PhD in law from the University of Hamburg, and he's held various positions at the International Committee of the Red Cross in Central Asia. His expertise includes public law, international criminal law, and humanitarian law. And Dr. Aizada Nuriddenova, an assistant professor at the Department of Social Sciences at the SDU University in Kazakhstan. She holds a PhD in international relations, specializing in Chinese foreign policy from Jilin University in China. She was previously a visiting scholar at the Central Asia Program at George Washington University. We're also delighted to welcome Dr. Assylzat Karabayeva, Director of Aizada Geo Center for Global Economy and Geopolitics, and Associate Professor at the Aizada Business School in Barcelona. Dr. Assylzat Karabayeva earned his PhD in Public Management from Aizada and has served as a visiting scholar at New York University Wagner School of Public Service. He specializes in global governance, non-market strategy, and political risk analysis. So we're very much looking forward to hearing his thoughts on the book today. So what an honor to be welcoming such brilliant guests today to discuss the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war for Central Asia. We're very much looking forward to hearing from you all. For anyone watching this live as well, you have the opportunity to ask your questions at the end of the session via the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your screens. And well, that's enough from me. I will now hand over to the authors of the book for their presentation. Assylzat, you're very welcome to share your screen if you wish, and go from there.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see. Great.
So, hello everyone. So, I'm Assylzat, and it's my pleasure to be here to present our edited volume at the EU Values Network webinar. And our book is The Russian-Ukraine War and its Implications on Central Asia, and resilience, connectivity, and the decolonization. So today I will generally be introducing the book as well as the key findings of the book, and the two contributors to this book, Rustam and Aizada, will more deeply go into their chapters and bring their key insights. So the book was published So the book was published in 2024 by Roman and Littlefield Publishing House. I and my co-editor, Assylzat Karabayeva from the Mahsud Darkbayev University, contributed in editing part, as well as we also had brilliant 12 authors coming from different parts of the region of Central Asia, and we have produced nine different chapters, specifically focused on different interdisciplinary area, as well as some kind of introductory and the conclusionary part. So background of the book. So again, when the war started in Ukraine in February 2022, and starting from that, we haven't had comprehensive literature how war reverberates over the region. we haven't had much literature systematically talking about the implications of the war. Mostly what we had was the reports from coming from different external authors, external to the region, and we saw the necessity to study, particularly from the perspective of Central Asian local scholars. So again, this lack of the literature as well as the need for the voice coming from the we can say authentic voices coming from the Central Asian scholars necessitated us to be able to produce such edited value. So again, the key question of the book was what are the implications of the war for the Central Asian countries? Particularly, we looked at the implications for the politics, foreign policy making, identity building, nation building part, the implication on the society, and as well as implications on the economy and on the legal system. And we have also applied so-called global IR approach. So this was also kind of first time the bringing this approach into the Central Asian studies, where this approach is important in the sense that to kind of enable the non-Western regions and enable the voices of non-Western scholars, or authentic, let's say, the voices in the region. So again, the book has three parts. One, the first part mostly focused on the nation building, state and the society relations and the media implications. The second part focused on the trade and domestic foreign policymaking implications, as well as the third part mostly focused on the legal and normative implications. In all of these parts, we have intentionally also tried to see the crisscross and like interplay of three important key aspects for us: the resilience, connectivity, and the decolonization, and how this also kind of the war in Ukraine actually shaping or has shaped this phenomena in the Central Asian region. So again, if I come to the main kind of general findings of this each section, so regarding to the nation building and the state society and the media part, what we have seen is that the war in Ukraine has accelerated the the decolonization discourses, also shaped the nation building processes, we also have noticed the implications on the role of the civil society. So the civil society become more active, as well as we have also seen how civil societies also started influencing on the state's policies as well. We see convergence between the understanding of the civil society as well as state policies. So the sympathy and as well as kind of the convergent kind of aspects between the state and the society can be noticed in this in the chapters. We have also looked at the implications on the media. The state media as well as independent medias were also analyzed and studied, and we have also noticed that the independent media sources mostly also kind of bringing more objective framing regarding to the war implications, as well as also bringing the discourses and reading or reclaiming for the decolonial approaches in order to study the history, the culture, even the language, right, so like restudying, let's say, right, the situation that we're dependent on the past dependencies. So again, the Soviet legacy is kind of continued, and this war in Ukraine and their implications on this, how far region are still dependent on the past, and extending the Soviet legacies have been also challenged by the independent media sources. We have also noticed that part in this part. We have also noticed some generational division. So again, depending what kind of sources the generations, different generations in Central Asian countries been consuming, this also seem impacted on the stance of this generation vis-a-vis the war, like the sides, or whether they prefer or they support the Russian side or the Ukraine side. In that particular sense, we have also noticed how the generations also had a different kind of opinion, as well as like mostly the young generations, again, bringing or like highlighting the questioning, let's say, the Soviet legacies, as well as aggressive acts coming from the Russian side. So in the second part regarding to the domestic and foreign policy making and the trade kind of implications, what we have kind of seen how the Central Asian countries balancing the power of the great powers. Again, this great power diplomacy become more kind of active since the war in Ukraine started. And here, again, the question in front of all Central Asian countries were how to balance, right, and how to adapt their foreign policy making, as well as enable their agencies. So I think Aizada will more focus on this part in her the presentation. We have also noticed in this part that still in terms of the economic aspects like trade or transportation or transit aspects, still Central Asian countries are heavily dependent on Russia. Although, for example, we have the Almas Akhmetov's chapter where he clearly shows that past dependency still exists and continuing, and as well as that's the matter of also like economic as well as in the political aspect. So again, the root of economic dependency on Russia also present or because of political kind of aspects as well. So that's another kind of finding of the book. We have also shown or seen that there is the indirect effects, in terms of the sanction, right? Sanctions having the indirect implications on Central Asian countries, which immediately also brought us to the third part of our book, where our authors mostly how this kind of geopolitical changes, right? As since the war, how this changes also put the legal and the normative reality different in the region. So again, both the states as well as the individuals needed to be again adapted, right, for these changes, because again, legal norms were changing, and the sanctions, especially common requirements, the sanction compliance requirements, also changing very quickly and establishing kind of new challenges and the new changes perhaps for the states as well as individuals in Central Asia. So again, our the scholars, our authors, contributors, they have highlighted this legal, like the increasing nature of the legal scrutiny due to the international sanctions, and also need for the balancing legal obligations, right? And also its compliance risks. And they have also mentioned this, the mobilization, right, and the migrants, moving, fleeing towards the Central Asian countries, and how this also kind of impacted for the economic and the societal aspects in the region. So again, if we come to the more important kind of implication and the key kind of findings of the book is that the war in Ukraine has become both a challenge as well as trigger for change in Central Asia. So in terms of normative or discourse kind of or ideational kind of perspective, we see because like since the war started in Ukraine, the society become more active. The society also like media, independent media become also active. We also see this convergence between the state and the society members in understanding, let's say, understanding. For example, if from the state side, if the states become more hearing of the society, although there were some kind of media kind of like limiting the rights of the media, but still the government officials mostly like being the hearing the society. At the same time, the society also understood that in making the foreign policies, also the state need to be very much kind of balanced, right? Here, not necessarily kind of separating, let's say, a region from the Russia or neglecting the rule of the Russia, but still carefully balancing the powers, all the powers, including the Russia. So in that particular sense, we have seen that awakening, right? The awakening and also the regenerating, accelerating discourses on decolonization or nation building, right? And the rules of the society in making the policies. But at the same time, we also have seen that the economic transition and transportation aspects heavily dependent on the Russia. So again, it is kind of the conflicting kind of issues, and perhaps this might again, this is both the trigger that kind of demands the change in the region, right? As well as it's going to be not easy kind of choice, especially for the Central Asian countries. So again, we see that the war is not only geopolitical, but also societal. We have also seen the growing kind of the interest for the regional cooperation in order to enable their agencies, so not only to become the passive kind of follower of a great power politics, but adapting to the current geopolitical reality and become active player with autonomous agency. Right, and for that we have also noticed that there is the kind of the interest for the regional resilience, as well as establishing their own autonomous, authentic regional order. So, so that part what we have covered during the book, but we also have kind of noticed some future directions. So they were about like diversifying the economy, alternative kind of being engaged with the alternative actors, right? Diversifying their partnership with the other the regions, with other countries, and again like enabling the regional connectivity, regional cooperation, right? And also like there was the call for the reducing dependence on Russia, especially on this economy and the security kind of aspects. And so in 2024, we have published the book, and since then almost 1 year passed. And if we consider the changes since then, I think all this kind of alternative seems being slowly kind of practicing by the Central Asian countries. So again, whether you can bring CA5 plus great power frameworks, right? CA5+1 projects, whether you can see how the middle corridors, right, being also kind of supported, invested, and developed recently. We also see how US and the EU also started engaging with the Central Asian countries. We have also seen that how the Central Asian countries also started shifting, let's say, their partnerships with the other regions, like including China, including Gulf countries, including Turkey, and how they also become more relevant partners in the security and the military kind of frameworks. So it seems like those important aspects that we have highlighted in the book are realizing in reality. I also want to slowly, very quickly to also mention the limitations, because the book was written and published within only over 1 year. So around 1 year, 4 or 5 months, so very short period of time, right? Writing and publishing the book, as well as when we say implications, perhaps we have we're able to research the implications of the war on Central Asia, for only the 1 year and 1.5 years, we can say. So it's still a the small period of research, and coming with the deep and thoroughly studying this the question might be in terms of short period of time, right? Be limited in giving more analytical, perhaps, right? In-depth the results. But I think all the authors did their good job, and they brought their own key and important significant findings with this work. Also, regarding to the regional scope, so mostly when we talk and when we say it's more about Central Asian countries, still the focus still and of the more chapters become on the Kazakhstan, where you might see less focus on Turkmenistan, for example, right, which is also another country of the Central Asia. And we also, perhaps you had some ambiguity regarding to the some concepts, right? You might, when you read the book, you might come across with different concepts, like, for example, Russia-Ukraine war, or war, Ukraine-Russia war, or Ukraine crisis, right? So there might be some inconsistency in terms of the terminology and the concepts, but how we seen is that a different discipline used particular terminologies, and also we had a different the authors, right? The Western trained or post-Soviet trained, and the particular framing of the language and the concepts and the terms also played out and also might be seen in our book. So with that, I want to stop now and give the floor to Aizada, and I'll be open for the question during the question session.
Hello all. I'm very glad to be joining this event. And in continuation to what Assylzat has said, I will just focus on Kazakhstan's foreign policy since the start of the war in Ukraine. And specifically, I'll be trying to explain Kazakhstan's actions within the concept of equidistant diplomacy. And when I started to write the book chapter, there was already a very rich scholarly discussion going on Kazakhstan's foreign policy, and many observers they noted that Kazakhstan was trying to distance itself from Russia and expand its relations with other regional partners. Some scholars also argued that Kazakhstan rediscovered its multi-vector foreign policy and started to practice a genuine multi-vector foreign policy, the one with much more depth and intensity. And some questioned this approach by saying that Kazakhstan might be just portraying the image of a distant partner of Russia, but in reality, without changing any tangible relations. So what I asked in the chapter in the next slide is that the impact of the war in Ukraine on Kazakhstan's foreign policy. And I argue that Kazakhstan, since the early 2022, Kazakhstan has been conducting an equidistant diplomacy as part of a larger hedging strategy that it had been practicing for several years prior to 2022, and it has been doing practicing this diplomacy consistently in relation to its foreign partners, and also in order to address the concerns of the domestic audience. And mostly what the chapter finds is that it is done in order to minimize the risks and maximize the benefits under uncertainties. So what I used as a conceptual framework was the combination of authoritarian audience cost and equidistant diplomacy. So here I support the growing number of scholars who study the role of public opinion in authoritarian countries, and so I try to focus on the role of public opinion in Kazakhstan, specifically since 2022. Although there is no consensus among scholars on how the domestic audience might punish the leaders in authoritarian settings, unlike in democracies where the audience can punish leaders for not fulfilling their promises in elections. But it's still relevant to bring this approach. So this, from one hand, appeasing the domestic public plus not offending the great powers gives us equidistant diplomacy, and I use this combination to explain Kazakhstan's foreign policy. Specifically, as a second conceptual framework, I focus on equidistant diplomacy developed by Tio and Koga, and it can be defined as a diplomatic tactic aimed at signaling a neutral image to both domestic audience and to international audience. And in practicing this approach, countries tend to deploy such tactics as paralleling downcasting, paralleling specific actions that are taken in relation to power, in order to build an impression that similar actions have been taken in regard to all relevant partners, so that no one particular partner is prioritized. And downplaying here refers to diplomatic statements aimed at lessening this, the effects of the impression that the country might be tilting toward one particular partner. And broadcasting means an explicit expression of the state's adherence to equidistant diplomacy. So further in the following slides, I would like to just provide some examples when Kazakhstan practiced those tactics. But before going to that part, I would like to just mention the importance of public opinion in Kazakhstan, specifically since the January events that occurred in early in 2022. So there were several surveys done by Bureau for Express Monitoring of Public Opinion called Demoscope. And for instance, the survey that was conducted in April 2022 showed that 13% of the respondents thought that that Russia was waging a war against Ukraine with the aim of its occupation and further annexation. And interestingly, when the same survey was conducted the following year, the share of the respondents who was asked this question, the share doubled, and it rose to 28%. So, moreover, as Assylzat also alluded to, there's this public reconsideration of national identity, decolonization, and the role of the Kazakh language that is going on through various debates and open discussions. And we need to note that Kazakhstan's statement, President Tokayev's statement at St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and that took place in June 2022, positively affected his approval rating. And again, according to Demoscope survey from May 2023, it showed that 75% of respondents in Kazakhstan liked their president. So there's this obvious link between the domestic public opinion and foreign policy conduct. So the following slides will show us certain cases when Kazakhstan practiced the tactics of paralleling, downplaying, and broadcasting. So one example of paralleling occurred in December 2022 when President Tokayev attended the meeting of the heads of the Commonwealth of Independent States after having concluded a treaty on allied relations with Uzbekistan 4 days earlier. And also in May 2023, Tokayev offered to Russia to convene 10th anniversary summit of Eurasian Economic Union in Astana, a week after his visit to China, during which Kazakhstan and China signed numerous economic agreements. So we can see that parallel initiatives were taken with several countries. Next, we have one case of downplaying, which occurred in May 2023. There was an official statement about President Tokayev's Victory Day parade visit, and this statement was published just a few hours before the visit itself. And the official statement emphasized that President Tokayev is determined to pay tribute to the memory of Kazakh soldiers who died during World War II in Tver Oblast, instead of saying the visit to participate in the parade. So this was made on the emphasis was made on Kazakh soldiers rather than the parade itself, in order to appease the domestic audience in Kazakhstan. And one example, there's one more example of broadcasting. When in September 2023, President Tokayev met with then German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and he assured that Kazakhstan would not assist Russia in circumventing the Western sanctions. But the following day, he made a clarifying comment stating that Kazakhstan is not anti-Russia, and Kazakhstan strongly maintains cooperative relations with Russia. So here we can see in this example that it shows that there's no tilting towards any side. Since the book chapter was written back in late 2023 and early 2024, I checked the recent events and tried to see whether Kazakhstan still continues to follow equidistant diplomacy, and I found out that it still does. And here we can see more cases and more examples in which Kazakhstan continues to use the tactics of downplaying, paralleling, and broadcasting. And for the sake of time, I won't focus on them much. And I would just like to conclude that in an attempt to maintain domestic stability and accommodate the foreign partners, and in order to, again, reduce the risks and maximize the benefits under this unclear or uncertain environment, Kazakhstan arrived at equidistant diplomacy as the most viable option. So I'll stop there, and I'll be glad to listen to your comments and questions. Thank you.
Okay. Should I be given floor? Should I start? Okay.
Yes, over to you, Rustam, when you're ready.
I was waiting for a signal. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening, and good morning. Thank you very much for joining this very interesting, important EU Values Network webinar. It is a real pleasure for me to be here today among colleagues, among friends, international relations experts, hopefully international lawyers, political scientists, and all those who, like me, have been trying to make sense of what the Russian-Ukrainian war means, not only for Europe, but also for the wider post-Soviet region. My contribution today, as you probably already guessed out, is based on my book chapter in this important book. The chapter is titled "International Legal Implications of the Russian-Ukrainian War for Central Asian States." And I would like to take the next 10 or 15 minutes to walk you through its main arguments, insights, and conclusions. I'll try not to take too much of your time, and just also as one important point, I would like to note to Assylzat, I'm gonna say and add certain things that I haven't been covering in my presentation during previous webinars or previous roundtables, previous meetings. So probably I will not be bothering you with requests to go from one slide to another. Okay, so but you can keep it on the slide after the title, and then we'll see if it's really needed, right? So regarding setting the scene, how the war tests international law, I would like to say that when the Russian Federation launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, which is already the next phase in the ongoing war since 2014, the aggression not only devastated Ukraine, as we all know, but also shook the foundations of international law. This war has generated an enormous range of repercussions: political, economic, diplomatic, humanitarian, but perhaps very crucially legal ones as well. So in my chapter, I'm starting with an observation that, which may sound a little bit pessimistic, meaning in the aftermath of the invasion, many people within the post-Soviet academic legal communities began to express disappointment, even skepticism toward international law itself. People questioned whether the system we had trusted could truly constrain power, prevent wars. Some people said it doesn't work. Some even came to perceive international law as some sort of an illusion or a polite fiction with no binding force. The crisis of faith, I call it the crisis of faith, is not unique to Central Asia, but it has taken deep root here, because of the region's proximity, geographical proximity, cultural proximity to Russia and Ukraine. So yet, as I argue, precisely in such a moment of this disillusionment, disappointment, adherence to international legal norms and principles becomes more urgent than ever. That's what I'm arguing in my chapter. My analysis deliberately adopts what my colleagues, lawyers, jurists call a lege ferenda approach, that is the law as it should be, as it ought to be, rather than a purely lex lata description of what the law currently is. I'm sorry for my legal jargon, okay, but I have to mention that it's important for the chapter. So I wanted to move beyond simply cataloging obligations on paper. Instead, I'm proposing in the chapter how Central Asian states should implement and internalize those legal obligations in light of the Russian-Ukrainian war. That distinction really matters. And I explained that in the beginning of my chapter. It is not merely descriptive, it is, I would say, prescriptive, even normative. I argue for what Central Asian states can and should do within the constraints of realpolitik. We all know what realpolitik means, right? To reaffirm the international legal order. Now, let me now turn to the first substantive section. Can I ask you, maybe here, Assylzat, to move to the... Oh, we are on a different presentation still. Okay, all right. the binding international obligations which are relevant to the 5 Central Asian states, so Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. But all of these 5 states became members of the UN in 1992. Thereby, they accepted the obligations of the United Nations Charter, the biggest and probably most famous international binding treaty. So this charter remains the cornerstone. It's valid, and it has several provisions which I'm mentioning in the presentation and in the chapter, Article 2, Paragraph 1, establishing the sovereign equality of all members, the prohibition of the threat or use of force against territorial integrity or political independence of any state, and the Article 2, Paragraph 2, adding the duty to fulfill obligations in good faith. These provisions are not unambiguous. They are very clear. They are very established. They create the legal duty upon every UN member, including our states, to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and to refrain from recognizing or supporting the results of unlawful aggression, such as Russia's annexation of Crimea and its recognition of the so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. The difficulty, of course, lies in the enforcement. I'm not going to repeat myself and take more time in repeating again about this enforcement problem. We all know about the need for certain reforms at that level, at the UN level. I would like to move towards certain principles that are relevant for the Central Asian states. And I mean the principle of non-intervention. Although the declaration where this non-intervention has been expressed, as I'm describing in my chapter, the UN General Assembly's resolution 2625, it can be called technically a soft law, meaning non-binding legal document. It nevertheless represents a universal consensus, which has influenced the formation of various important norms of customary international law. So for Central Asian states, this means that even without taking overt political sides, and my colleague Aizada already described well those political ramifications in her excellent presentation, they are still legally expected to abstain from certain acts or statements which would imply recognition of territorial changes achieved by force, right? So soft law norms thus function as a moral and political compass, right? I would call it a compass, guiding state behavior. And here, I would like to mention one very interesting phenomena. Can we? I don't see it in my presentation. It was there. Somehow disappeared. But okay, one of the most intriguing phenomena I discuss is what some scholars have termed, as I read the sources, have termed strategic silence. In their voting records, in public statements, the Central Asian governments have sought certain balance, delicate equilibrium. For example, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have declared respect for Ukraine's territorial integrity. They refuse to recognize Russian-occupied territories. They have also declined to contribute troops or to participate in Russia's war effort. Yet, when it came to documents, like I mentioned before, United Nations General Assembly resolutions, which were condemning the aggression or calling to condemn the aggression, demanding reparations, these same states, together with other 3, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, mostly abstained. So this discrepancy, the strategic silence between words and actions, reveals a pragmatic balancing act, as I see it, as I analyze it. I noted in the chapter that the leaders of these countries operate within a so-called constrained geopolitical environment, which is dominated by Russian economic influence, media narratives, security linkages, while simultaneously seeking to maintain constructive relations with China, the US, and the European Union. So strategic silence, therefore, becomes some sort of a survival strategy. Several chapters in the book also mentions, in different wording, but mention a similar thing, a way of signaling quiet disagreement with Russia's aggression while avoiding direct confrontation or retaliation. Okay, I call it strategic silence. Maybe there is a better term, but for the want of better term, I call it like this, right? Now, coming back to the question of obligations, the second major category of those legal obligations that I analyzed, they deal with international human rights law, universal international human rights law. All 5 Central Asian states are parties to both the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So these treaties impose obligations that apply not only in peacetime, but also during armed conflict. So I'm not gonna waste your time by naming those particular provisions, types of human rights. I don't think we have time for that. I wrote on those in more or less detailed way in the chapter itself. But for Central Asia, these rights, like rights of minorities or fair trial guarantees, they translate into concrete duties. They have to safeguard individuals affected by the war, by the conflict, whether they're citizens or refugees or migrants, and to ensure that domestic governance itself reflects these universal principles which were recognized by international community of states. So in my chapter, I invoke relevant jurisprudence from the United Nations Human Rights Committee, certain cases that it considered, and these cases kind of underscore lessons for Central Asian governments confronting political repression or surveillance at home, right? So, okay, I'm getting signals here that the time is limited, so I will have to somehow omit several important points, but unfortunately, time is never enough. All right. So, my chapter also focuses on certain dimensions, certain recommendations that I provide in order to make sure that Central Asian states conform to their obligations, do not violate them, and at the same time signal to the community, to the international community worldwide, that it is going to respect the universal principles that have been violated in this particular conflict, and make sure thus in the future that their international global standing remains peaceful and cooperative, right? So to conclude, let me return to the broader philosophical question that motivated my chapter. Is international law still relevant in a world where brute force seems to prevail, including for Central Asia? My answer is a firm yes. Only if we continue to believe it, apply it, and demand its consistent observance. For Central Asia, the war in Ukraine is not a distant European conflict. It is some sort of I call it a mirror, reflecting their own vulnerabilities and responsibilities as sovereign members of the international community. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your questions and the following discussion, if there is any. Thank you.
Thank you, Assylzat, Aizada, and Rustam. That was very interesting, a great overview of the book, and congratulations to you and the other contributors as well. So just to remind our audience today, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. Feel free to write any comments or questions you have there, and we'll come to those soon. But we will now turn to our expert discussant with us here today, Professor Assylzat Karabayeva, for his thoughts and reflections on the book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Emily, for moderating this, and thanks to the authors for putting this together. So I'll try to be as brief as possible so we can have time for Q&A. So in a nutshell, I think this is a great book, and it's a great contribution. I think we need more research in this geographic area. I think it's important for the world, and it's definitely important from the European Union perspective. And I think it's an area that has a lot of action, as the book shows. So that's very welcome. It's very welcome also that that research is produced by local talent, and I think that has an extra value to contribute to our conversation about this. I also like that it's relatively empirical, which is also very important, I think, in using different methods and different type of data. And I think that's also a value added. Okay, having said that, I have two main, I think, reflections that the book generated while I was reviewing it, and then a few questions that I'll throw in there, and feel free to answer or not. So the first reflection is I really liked about the book is its nuance, rigor, and let's say bravery or intellectual honesty, in the sense that it covers all types of issues that we would like to see covered in that region, from economic, public opinion, state social relationships, legal elements, sanctions and potential sanction evasions, and so forth. So I think that's that's very interesting. It's a great contribution. The other one is that it's also very nuanced and it's capable of bringing in the complexities and the dualities and the multifaceted elements that we see in the region. Let me just give you a few examples. So one, for example, as we were talking just a minute ago, is this and it came through in these two presentations, which is both the strategic silence, which seems to be more substantially pro-EU or pro-Western or rule of law to a certain extent. And on the other hand, this equidistance that is necessary and at the same time somewhat symbolic. We see how the region has tried to diversify its economic relations, but we also clearly see how the region has also being conducive to sanctions evasion, for example, and therefore still linking very strongly to Russia. We see also how perception of Russia has changed, and in particular has gone negative to a certain extent, or its positivity has decreased. But that external, perhaps even threat perception that you mentioned has also, to a certain extent, generated that capturing or proximity between an active society, civil society, and the state, in this case, with some authoritarian traits. So all of that, I think, is very intellectually interesting. Overall, I think that not only is it a good piece of research, but the results are relatively positive, and this is a very subjective opinion on my side, but it's relatively positive in the sense that from a rule of law perspective or an EU perspective, I think the region is moving in what we could consider right direction. And of course, that's very normative and subjective on my side, but good. The other element that I think is important and where I have some more doubts and where I think we could have more conversations is about the nation building part of things. And in this time and era that we live in, we can see how nationalism can be a positive thing in terms of unity and capacity to develop, but it can be a very negative thing as well. And I think nation building is interpreted as overly optimistic or positive light in the book, and I think perhaps that we could also think about more derivatives of that. Okay, and to finalize a few questions. So what about the perception of the EU? Is there anything about that in the research? I couldn't find it, but I'd like to know your opinion. I would also like to know a little bit more about let's say, the causality between media and public opinion. I think the book takes a stance that the directionality is media imprints or affects public opinion. I wonder whether that's really the case. I really think I think the comparison between state and non-state media is very interesting in the book, so I think that's very welcome. And if I'm correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is this that non-state media tends to be more critical, or you say objective? I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Perhaps also something about the generational divide and what explains that. And finally, I'd throw in an idea of a future book, or if you have any new any insights, I'd love to hear about. How does the Middle East conflict, another important conflict not too far away of that region, affect the region? I think that would be very interesting to see how that plays out. That might be a next project. In any case, thank you very much for the book. It's been a joy to review, and yeah, happy to hear your comments.
Thank you so much, Angel, for your insights and excellent questions there, and ideas potentially for another book there. Intellectual Bravery is a very nice review indeed. Presenters, if you wish to respond to Angel's reflections or his questions there at the end, feel free to jump in. There's three of you, but as you wish.
Dear Engel, thank you very much for all the brilliant comments and also for the questions, for your review and for your feedback. So, I want to kind of cover some part of the questions, and also I want also to give the floor to my colleagues so that they can also join and answer for the relevant question. So, regarding to the elements about the nation building process, so still the Central Asian countries that we are still constructing, we are still building the nation. We are still in the process, and as the war in Ukraine accelerated, the rule of society and also the society become more active in for example, in terms of the humanitarian aid, right, towards the Ukraine, or the going to the street, like actively advocating, right, and again. I think we also need to kind of mention this part. In all the chapters and all authors unanimously, we agreed that who is the aggressor and who is the victim here, who is breaking the international law, and who is the victim here. In that particular sense, we have also seen how the society members, right, especially the young generation, being more active, demanding the state for the particular activities, whether it's humanitarian aid, whether it's scholarships for the Ukraine students, for example, right? So in that particular sense, we have seen this active mobilization of the society, and here we have also in different chapters also shown that the state was listening this kind of the requirements, right, or demands coming from the society. And we have also seen noticed that the state and society's kind of view, right, or this kind of stance, they collocate rather than contrast to each other. So in that particular sense, there is there was the kind of question or there was the kind of the inquiry, right, from the state, that the state is actually need to consider the voices of the society, you know, in building in building or policy making kind of or nation building kind of process of the state. And again, Aizada has also mentioned, right, and shown that the state hasn't have hasn't had any kind of other kind of opportunities or limited in sense rather than limited. So in other words, the state needed to listen to the society. So we have seen that part, and it's also this kind of approach also in the other term, we also see how this also enabled perhaps or legitimized the regime of Tokayev, for example, in the case of the Kazakhstan, right? So again, in order to legitimize the political regime of the Tokayev, also this also kind of we see that kind of implication. So it's again kind of, you know, the two-sided, right? So yeah, so again, here seems like there is the collocation, but still there is the kind of further requirement or demand from the state to kind of build more civic, right, the nation building, which more hearing the voices of the civil society. Regarding to this, the media side, right, the independent media and the state media, how they shaped. So we have seen also the different kind of medias. For example, those medias who were kind of the generating the news in Russian languages only, since the war started also changing the language. So they switched language from Russian to the Kazakh languages. In that particular sense, we see how also the media also started kind of changing their also kind of the policies, and as a result also kind of gave the newses, right, information in the local language, and also the society generally, they were also kind of more good or more kind of inclusive, positive regarding to these changes. Yes, as you rightly mentioned, so mostly the book or the chapter was about how the media kind of, shaping the public opinion, but at the same time, we have also seen how the kind of, also kind of response or kind of will from the side of the society to be able also to discourse, right? How the media can also further strengthen the role of the civil society, especially regarding this decolonization, discourse kind of aspects. Regarding to the generational divide, so youth mostly in Central Asia tended to be more Ukrainian, because mostly they are the ones who consume social media news more like so, because still Central Asian countries, the media sources, they are majority are Russian sources based media, and the older generation, they tended to still consume this TV kind of media sources, which are more pro-Russian, right? And the young generation tend to be more kind of like consumers of the social media, and considering the information from different kind of perspective. In that sense, we have seen this generational divide regarding to their stance on the war in Ukraine. The one thing about the Middle East, so again, in the case of the war in Ukraine, still, the past, right, the historical past was kind of the point, right, which united the region, Central Asia and the Ukraine, right? But since the war started, we see how this Ukraine and Central Asia actually kind of departing, more separating, right? So again, the Ukraine turning more towards the European side, Central Asian countries turning to more Asian side, right? So in that particular sense, and when the war in Ukraine kind of started, it was kind of emotionally kind of, impacted to the Central Asian countries, mostly because the common history, right, common past, okay, more interactions in terms of trade, culture, language, like politics, right? But in the case of the Middle Eastern countries, the Central Asian countries are not sharing, let's say, the exactly same or similar aspects. In that particular sense, we might see the difference, how the society tended to look the issue in or war in Ukraine, also all this kind of geopolitical crisis in the Middle East. In the book, we haven't covered the Middle Eastern side, so we were mostly focused on only, we can say, we only focused on the war in Ukraine and the Central Asian countries. So I want to give the floor to the Rustam and Aizada. Perhaps you can kind of continue for some questions, perhaps related to the EU, and perhaps you can also add up some more kind of insights.
I want to be a gentleman and give the first floor to Aizada, maybe.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just briefly, thank you very much, Dr. Saz Carranza, for your interesting and insightful comments. One thing that you mentioned was the perception of the EU. Unfortunately, I didn't cover that. So my book chapter was mostly covering Kazakhstan's approach toward various regional partners. So mostly it was its relations to Russia, China, and plus the European Union, but it was coming from Kazakhstan's side rather than perception of the EU. And you also mentioned the maybe symbolic nature of equidistance. I agree with that. So to a certain extent, it is symbolic. Especially one interesting finding is that Kazakhstan tends to initiate symbolic ideas in regard to Russia, for example, like hosting the 10th anniversary of Eurasian Economic Union, or creating the Organization of Russian Language, which usually did not produce much tangible results, while in interacting with China or European Union, it looks like those interactions tend to bring some real or tangible results. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Now I'll try to be quick because Emily is pushing again. So because there are so many things to say, but very quickly I'll react to the last question from Angel, who was so kind to comment very professionally about our project, meaning the conflict between Israel and Hamas, right? While by constitution our countries are all considered secular, we still have a lot of local population who practice Islam, who are Muslim, right? So from what I've heard and from what I've read, I observed multiple times when there was explicit support made to the plight of the Palestinians and its civilian population as a negative consequence of the war between Israel and Hamas. And I've seen even commentary and analysis on the side of my law colleagues who were analyzing how exactly Israel violated this or that particular legal source or that treaty or that principle and so on. So I would say that we observe here, especially in Tajikistan, some regions of Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, some outright support for Muslims in that part of in that disastrous part of the Middle East, right? And again, comparing that conflict with the Russia-Ukraine war is probably not very fair because, first of all, Palestinian conflict has been perceived by populations like something already going on for decades, which it has, right? And it has never been seen as something very extraordinary, which is of course not correct. And it's further away from the direct influence of the Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine, right? But of course, because of the influence of media, because of the developments in informational sphere, a lot of people consider themselves experts and start analyzing in favor of this or that state. I think it's a very under-researched area, okay? And Angel's idea to maybe produce a new book in the future deserves a very close attention. I believe this can be a very interesting point, and probably there the approaches, the methods that will apply may be very different from this particular book, right? We have to take into account certain other factors, certain other influences, which lie beyond the scope of this particular work. So that's my initial feelings about this question.
Thank you. And my apologies for timekeeping. It is a really interesting book, and I wish we could talk about it for much longer than we do. Angel has had to leave, but he passed on his thanks to everybody to attend today. And yeah, this gives us a little bit, just maybe 2 minutes for a question that's come through in the Q&A chat for you all, whoever would like to answer it. The question is, from Anna. She says, great discussion. I'm looking forward to reading the book. What other, oh, it's gone, sorry. Rustam, you've answered it, but I will read it anyway. What other actors from the wider region or without, I'm particularly thinking about India, are being considered to bring a good influence, to be like-minded or to be welcome to collaborate in Central Asian interests? And I see, Rustam, you've responded there, but perhaps if other people had a similar question, you or others could talk through that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's a very good question. In terms of actors, there are many actors who have influence in this particular region. So, because of the constraints of the size of the chat, I just mentioned one particular actor, which is Azerbaijan. It's a neighbor. It's a Caucasian state, right? It's bordering directly with Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. So, Kazakhstan and Russia. Right. So for me, this particular country, which is right now trying to put a distance between itself and Russian political influence. Also related to a more or less recent incident with a plane which crashed in Kazakhstan, and they accused Russians for that. I see that there is a lot of trends right now in that direction. Activization in academic sphere, activization in terms of economic and trade cooperation between Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, between Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan. There are a lot of people now coming from Baku to Almaty and Tashkent to open businesses and things like that. So I think that would be a good example of a like-minded state, of a positive influence. I don't know about India though. Maybe the difference is in India is not traditionally perceived in this region as a very closely tied neighbor. It's far away. We didn't have the same history except for Baburids, right? As we have with Russia and Ukraine, right? So, but maybe I'm missing something here. I haven't read any analysis on that particular point. I wouldn't consider China as an actor like that, because we know all about China's position with respect to this particular conflict. So some Caucasian neighbors, Iran, I don't really think, to a certain extent, it's a partner of the Russian Federation. So I wouldn't say that there is a good influence coming from that particular. By the way, EU was mentioned before. For similar reasons, I think there is under-researched question of EU's influence and EU's members' influence in this region. There is no active direct dialogue in terms of support or humanitarian aid, or not to say military aid, from Central Asia to Ukraine or Palestine for that matter, right? Because again, EU is far away, and isn't that what we are trying to achieve with this EU values project? Try to understand that particular connection, right? So there is not much on that, to be honest with you, because the book is focused on Central Asia, on our states, right? So, but maybe perhaps this is something to also broach in the future. My students constantly ask me questions like, can we, if my rights are violated, can we go to the European Court of Human Rights? Okay, and you cannot do that if you're not a member of the Council of Europe, and Kazakhstan is not, Uzbekistan is not, Kyrgyzstan is not. So maybe it's something that we also have to more closely analyze and dig into and explore in the future. That's what I would say. The question about actors is definitely very, very important. It has all kinds of ramifications: political, legal, humanitarian, cultural, and so on and so forth.
Regarding to the India, so yes, as Rustam mentioned, India was not active, we can say, before the war in the region, but since the war, the Russia's influence or impact. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. All good.
So it's stopped. So if you hear me, I want to continue. So since the war in Ukraine started, we see how the influence of Russia, right, started fading away, especially in the economic as well as in the security aspects. So the Central Asian countries somehow losing their kind of, the trust on
oh, that's a shame. Assylzat, I don't know if you can hear us, but
She's got
you frozen.
Connection problem.
Oh, what a shame.
We have certain events at the university here. Our network is really experiencing some big pressure.
Okay.
Maybe that's the reason.
Wait a few more seconds, otherwise what we can do is in the description, because we'll upload this recording to YouTube, we can make sure that there's an added section at the bottom that answers this question in detail. I think actually, yes, unfortunately, that's dropped off there.
Emily,
well,
very technical question, if I may. It's going to be posted on YouTube, right? Is it?
Yes. So if you'd like, if anyone here would like to rewatch this session or share it with anybody, yes, it will be on our website, the EU Values website, and our YouTube channel in the next week or so. So yes, do check that out and share it with anybody. And along with that, there'll be the link to the book, of course, and any resources. And we'll make sure that this answer, we'll have it at least in written form. Anyone?
Will the comment section be open there, or is it closed?
Yes. Yeah, true. People can comment on both YouTube and our website. So great. Well, I guess that brings us to time. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the speakers today. Angel and Assylzat will thank you after. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Pass our gratitude to Angel for his amazing feedback. We're very pleased to hear that. I think I can safely say that on behalf of all the authors and editors. I hope, Aizada, you don't mind me saying this gratitude. Yes, I
sure.
think same.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for organizing this event, Emily.
Yes, of course.
It took
some
some time,
values.
some effort, but it happened, right?
We got there. So yes, very happy to meet you all. And thank you everyone for attending wherever you are in the world today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.